Council already. We're going to get started for this evening. So we have 3 meetings on this evening. We have a planning board meeting, we have a committee of the whole meeting, and we have a special council meeting. So I will begin by calling to order our planning board meeting of January 9th, 2024 here in the city of Summerside. Welcome to all members of the public, residents who are here with us today, both in person and those who are joining online. Reminder that all of our council meetings are live streamed on YouTube. I never see my kids watching our council meetings on YouTube, but they're there, rest assured. So welcome to all of you as well. This evening we, before our meetings here, we had some music playing from our resident DJ, Brian, who will be taking requests. I think Bruce has already made a couple, but we decided to start playing music before our council meetings, at least to create a nicer atmosphere. And we started this evening with Catherine McClellan, a product of Summerside PEI, and fantastic person, and I think the album was the songs of Jean McClellan, and she did a fantastic show on that this summer. So, getting back on track, I've called the meeting to order. We'll call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. This will be from a member of Planning Board, of which there are 4, Councillor Snow, seconded by Councillor Duran. All members of the Planning Board in favor of proceeding with the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll continue with the agenda as presented. For members of the public, it is Councillor Duran, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Snow, and myself are the members of Planning Board. Planning Board performs its tasks, and then Council ultimately makes the decisions. But through the evening, when we are discussing Planning Board matters, Council has the opportunity to ask questions as well and engage. But it will only be members of Planning Board who will be voting at this stage for anything, and then ultimately would come back to full Council. We begin each one of our meetings with the land acknowledgement, where we acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abagway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respect to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. This time I'll ask any member of Planning Board or Council to declare any conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda. Hearing none, this is the point where I get to hand the meeting over to our Chair of Planning Board, Councillor Duran. Councillor?
Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship. This is the, I guess, the second of 3 meetings. The first gave us an opportunity to have the applicant, I guess, present the application, and for us to hear from the public. And so this meeting, we will address some of the questions and concerns that came in at that meeting, and our final meeting will take place. I guess it's not in stone, but with Council's consensus, it'll take place this coming Monday, January 15th. So that's when the decision will be made at 6:30 p.m. at our regularly scheduled monthly Council meeting. So with that, I will begin. 25 Frank Mellish Street, restricted use application. The purpose of the application is to allow an emergency housing shelter as a restricted use in the institutional I zone. A restricted use requires Council approval. Background: an application was received from the Department of Land, Housing and Communities for 25 Frank Mellish Street, PID number 1030303. This application will require City Council approval to allow an emergency housing shelter as a restricted use in the institutional I zone. Report. Under Section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, when Planning Board reviews a restricted use, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw, the zoning bylaw. Staff comment: an emergency housing shelter use conforms with the bylaw, section 8.5, subject to Council approval for a restricted use approval in the institutional I zone. The current zoning, institutional I, does not change. One of the purposes of the restricted use designation is to accommodate unique uses where a zoning amendment or rezoning would result in undesirable land uses due to the as-of rights in that zone. The proposed restricted use is permitted in other zones if the property were to be rezoned to one of these zones. To accommodate the restricted use being sought, it would result in other undesirable land uses in the area. The specific uses can be achieved by designating the property as a restricted use, allowing only the restricted use. The permitted uses of the institutional zone are noted below. So the institutional I zone, which is the current zoning. Purpose of this zone is to accommodate institutional buildings for education, health, government, public safety, recreation, culture, and religion. And the permitted uses, subject to bylaw requirements in the institutional zone, are for institutional cemetery, government office, college or university, school premises, place of worship, hospital, cultural or interpretive center, accessory building, small, medium, and large child care facilities, public library, museum, and gallery, or community center. Residential permitted uses would be community care and nursing home or social services agency, and there are no other permitted uses. Discretionary uses subject to council approval include jail or correctional center, emergency services facility, utility facility, solar energy collector system, or research/laboratory facility. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment, the proposed restricted use would conform to the official plan, section 5.12. As the land use will remain as institutional, the restricted use designation is to accommodate unique uses where an official plan amendment would result in undesirable land uses. Should the restricted uses cease to operate for 12 months, the restricted use lapses and the zoning remains as institutional I and can be utilized as such. The restricted use applies to the site, not the applicant. C, suitability of the site for the proposed development. Staff comment, the site is suitable for this development. City servicing and access can be extended to the site from Frank Mellish Drive. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment, the property is zoned institutional, I. The restricted use, emergency housing shelter, is compatible with surrounding institutional, residential, and neighborhood land uses. As per section 8.5E, council may attach terms and conditions to the restricted use approval. Council may revoke a restricted use approval for a violation to any term or condition attached to an approval, subject to a recommendation from the planning board. E, any comments from residents or other interested persons? A public meeting was held on December 18th, 2023. The public meeting notice was advertised in The Guardian, December 5th edition. 10 letters were mailed to 11 property owners. At the public meeting, Jason Doyle, representing the Department of Housing, Land and Communities, provided an overview of the proposed intent for the restricted use. The emergency housing shelter will serve people over the age of 18 and is gender inclusive. The Department of Housing, Land and Communities has expressed interest for the operation of a 10-bed emergency housing shelter. That expression of interest, the closing was on December 13th, 2023, and has also expressed interest for supply of the housing form, such as modular units. The shelter will be operated by a third-party nonprofit organization as they have more expertise. The shelter is intended to operate from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The clients of the shelter may attend supportive day programs during the hours of the shelter being closed. A number of the public attended the meeting, and the following people spoke at the meeting. Chris Ryan, 425 Taylor Road, had questions regarding funding, who will be serviced at the emergency housing shelter, and who will operate the shelter. Byron Poppet, 497 Sherbrooke Road, was opposed to the restricted use as he lives within 180 feet of the proposed site. Ken Miner of Roy Boats Avenue Apartments expressed concerns for residents in the area and requested the staffing model for the shelter. Susan DeRoche, 343 North Market Street, noted that this emergency housing shelter is not the same as the men's shelter on Winter Street, as the shelter on Winter Street is open 24/7, and the proposed emergency housing shelter is open 12 hours daily. Duncan McKillop, member of Trinity United Church, read a letter attached to this report at the public meeting. Councillor Barb Gallant read a letter attached to this report from Rena Gallant. The development officer received written comments in the form of letters and emails, also attached to this report. F, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking, and parklands for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment, the city's water supply in the area is adequate for the new development, and the sewage treatment plant can handle the additional loading. The developer will be responsible for the installation of water and sewer services from the existing mains to the building or buildings. The existing private street is two-lane, two-way, with a ditch storm system to a storm retention pond on the property. This new shelter pad location must maintain the existing drainage ways for the existing storm and provide a site drainage plan showing how the new area is to maintain the existing drainage and provide a drainage plan for the new pad area. Electric grid infrastructure has adequate capacity for proposed development. Electric infrastructure currently stops at the end of Frank Mellish Drive and will need to be extended through existing lands and building/parking lot of existing facility to connect to the new development. Land space will need to be made available for electric utility extension amongst other utilities and development plans. The City of Summerside covers the cost of up to 90 meters of overhead extension, with the balance of cost to the developer. A site plan approval will be required for the site. Parking requirements will be required to comply with city bylaws. There is no parkland requirement for the proposed restricted use. G, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally. Staff comment, a site plan approval will be required. Pedestrian or vehicular access and safety will be considered upon review of the site plan. There is a sidewalk on the south side of Roy Boats Avenue. Frank Mellish Street will serve as the pedestrian access to Roy Boats Avenue. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, the proposed restricted use is compatible with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. The subject property is not on a designated heritage property and has not been registered or profiled on historicplaces.ca. The subject property is located within the Heritage District, but it is not a reviewable development under the current Heritage Conservation Bylaw. I, impacts on city finances and budgets. Staff comment, this application does not impact city finances or budgets. Other matters as specified in this bylaw, and there are none. K, other matters as considered relevant. Staff comment, the proposed location of the emergency housing shelter based on the existing servicing, water, sewer, and electric, is estimated to be 60 meters or 200 feet or more from the nearest residential home. Planning officer comments. Planning board/council may place conditions on a restricted use approval, i.e. temporary, number of months, and number of units or beds, site plan approval for specific location, copy of operational plan from the NGO that will operate the shelter. If the number of beds or units are expanded in the future, would council require the applicant to apply and repeat the public process? Council did place conditions on the Winter Street Men's Shelter, and those conditions are reasonable for this location as well. Police services comments. While police services acknowledge the need for the emergency housing shelter, they cannot offer comments on potential public safety impacts without knowing who will be responsible for operating the shelter and the operator's planned policies and operating procedures. Additional comments from the applicant, Jason Doyle. Connection to the mental health programming at the Prince County Hospital. It is possible that clients would be able to access programming at community mental health at PCH, such as walk-in clinics, evening groups, and AA. Staff would be encouraging and facilitating that to happen so the client could address issues and improve their lives. In recent meetings with service providers, community mental health and addictions did indicate that their new flexible assertive care teams, FACT, would become involved with the people experiencing homelessness in the area once they are staffed, estimated to be February 2024. The Canadian Mental Health Association outreach team is also active with clients. There may be benefit of the proximity to community mental health and addictions at PCH, but we would leave that to our colleagues in mental health and addictions to address. Park Street staffing. There are different levels of staffing required at certain times depending on the need. For example, we have additional staff in place during peak periods for intake purposes. The staffing model is 2 staff on at all times in each modular complex. This would be a total of 4 staff. Housing proposals from expressions of interest. We are completing our review of the responses to the expression of interest, and we hope to have the review finished by January 19th. Upon completion of the review, we will be communicating with the selected organization. Security. We have not finalized any decision on security, but we expect that this would be part of the safety plan. Staffing model of operator. We have not finalized this. It will be a collaborative approach with the selected operator, but we would expect that it would be a double staff model where there is 2 people on the floor at all times. There may be a need for more staff during peak periods, such as intake. Staff review. Staff support the application from the Department of Land, Housing and Communities for 25 Frank Mellish Street, PID number 1030303, to allow an emergency housing shelter as a restricted use in the institutional I zone. Council may attach terms and conditions to the restricted use approval. Should Council wish to apply conditions related to the shelter housing form, such as modular buildings, operations and or public safety, it will be difficult to do so with this information unavailable at this time. As per section 5.10, part B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision, and that is Monday, January 15th. Planning board recommendation, the application from Department of Land, Housing and Communities for 25 Frank Mellish Street, PID number 1030303, to allow an emergency housing shelter as a restricted use in the institutional I zone, be recommended to be approved by council. Are there any questions from council or?
I'm not on the planning board, but I believe I can ask a question.
Anyone, yeah.
Okay, just first one that I had was the C, suitability of the site for proposed development. The city servicing and access can be extended the site from Frank Mellish Drive. Who's covering the cost of that? Is that, I know that the electric is a certain amount, but for water and sewer, is that the developer that picks up that cost?
It says the developer will be responsible for the installation of water and sewer services from the existing mains to the buildings.
Okay. And the other one was the, it says the existing private street. I know that when we do developments, they're to put in a curb system, but it seems to be allowing a ditch system here. Now, and the only reason I raise that is because if that street is extended, are they not supposed to put in a curbing? And if it's a private lane now, if it gets turned over to the city and it's got a ditch system, that shouldn't have been allowed because other developers, when they are developing, have to put in a curb system. So and I know it says existing, but I'd just like some clarification on that. And the only other one I had was right at the last there about the security. I don't know how we, I hope that that's in place before we move this to council. That's all.
The only, and Gordon or Linda may be able to elaborate, but I'm just basing this off an example. I think it's David James Street off of Pope Road, which is a private street. City doesn't do snow removal or anything there, so when you say if the city takes it over, I don't think the city is obligated to.
Right.
City isn't obligated to take over a street unless they deem it to be worth taking over.
But if that street is extended, is my point, I guess. Frank Mellish Street if it was,
It would still be a private street, because it's a provincial government-owned street now, and it would continue to be, because if they own the existing,
okay.
like the manor. I see Gordon nodding, so I think I'm, I think I'm right. So the provincial government would retain ownership of that street, and it would continue to be a privately owned street by the provincial government. I saw Deputy Mayor Snow, and then I saw Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. So I guess there's a couple things. There's just there's some answers that are not in here that I was really hoping we would have tonight. I guess my question would be to staff or whoever can answer. Do we have a proposed opening date if, let's say, everything goes as planned, it gets approved? When are the doors to the shelter supposed to open? Proposed, rough?
I don't have that information. I think it was mentioned at the public meeting that they were looking at spring of 2024.
My problem is we're sitting here talking, we don't have a security plan, we don't have who's running the shelter. There's some answers I think that are very important. I want to make it very clear that we need a shelter last week and the week before and the week before. I stood outside today, we all did on a housing announcement, and it was extremely cold, and we rushed that announcement because we were cold. So I stood there thinking how ironic that is that we're doing a housing announcement, complaining about the cold, and now we're here tonight talking about an emergency shelter, which is all good, but there's some answers I think as a council we owe it to those that are concerned. Seniors in that area are concerned. They've expressed their concerns. I understand that. Whether or not they're legitimate concerns or not, that's to be discussed and talked about here, but I think there's questions that need to be answered before we move forward. So that's why I'm asking if there's a time, like if we're saying, you know, the shelter's gonna be open the end of January, then I think might be moving appropriately. But they're saying they're reviewing the applicants now, the partners, community partners, and they're gonna do the review on the 19th. So we don't know who the community partner is, and if I don't know who the community partner is, I don't know how comfortable I am and not that I have the knowledge either, but I think it's a very important part of the process that people will feel safe with the decision council's making, what the security procedures are gonna be, staffing. I just think there's a lot of questions that, or a lot of information that we currently don't have in front of us in this document that I was hoping would be here tonight. So I'm sort of curious on the staff recommending it to be approved without having that information. That I sort of question that a little bit, but yeah, I guess I'll just let that sink in until other councillors get to speak. But I was just hoping there would be more information here tonight for not only councils but the residents that do have concerns.
And we're not obligated to have that meeting on Monday. That was just the next available time, so
No,
if we feel that we need more time, then we can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I
Yep.
started the conversation.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm on page 4 of the report, and I want to cross-reference point I on with point I on 5. So I'll go with number F on 4. It says land space will need to be made available for electric utility extension, amongst other utilities, and then it goes down in the next sentence. City of Summerside covers the cost of up to 90 meters of the overhead extension with balance of cost to development. So then I'm going to slip over to number 5, page 5 in the report, section I, and it talks about impacts on city finances and budgets. Very shortly it says this application does not impact city finances or budgets, that it would come out of development. I just want to cross-check that because I'm thinking we're coming into budget season, and I do agree with Council or Deputy Mayor Snow that some of the questions that we had hoped for to get the answers to, I think that's one very important question that I have, simply because we have other developments. People know how I feel about the fire hall, And like people have questions about that. Is one going to impact on the other when it comes to costs? So I would really appreciate getting that clarified, and it'd be the same as Councillor McDougall's question as well. Thank you.
Maybe I can just jump in on that one. So on any development that happens, our electric utility covers the cost of the first 90 meters of overhead wiring, so that's standard for any type of development. So in section I, where it says the application does not impact city finances or budgets, that more refers to that there are no grant requests or other operational costs for this development that are going to impact us.
I guess I'm just needing more clarification or explanation on the part about the road. Because I have an area that was turned over from the province to the city, and it wasn't before it was turned over from the province to the city. The province did not put it up to city specs, and now that piece of land is deemed unusable for what the landowner wants to use it for, and they're being told it's on them to do curbing and sewer, water, etc. So I'm just a little confused about how we're saying if it is turned over later. Like I due to the past, I don't trust that process that it's turned over and it's in the condition that we require it to be. Therefore, it would be another budget expense on us, as it's a budget expense on the landowner that owns the land that I'm using as an example. So I'm not sure how you want to go about finding the answer to that, or
I think I can answer that for you if you wish. So Frank Mellish Drive is currently a private road into a provincially owned building. So this proposal is proposing to extend that private road at their cost. Like Councillor Dwaran said, there are other private roads in the city that the city does not maintain, that are still, all the cost of maintaining them is on the owner of that road. So that's how Frank Mellish Drive would operate. The other situation that you're referring to, I think, like, we could chat about offline, but that was a situation of, I believe, when those roads were turned over to the city, likely would have been 1997, just post amalgamation, and at that time our city standards were different.
okay.
Gordon, is all of Frank Mellish Drive private? A private road? From is it Walker? Not Walker. Roy Boats?
Councillor,
In?
I believe so.
It is a private?
Linda would know better. Yeah.
Okay, that makes,
As much as I love ditch discussion and sidewalk discussion and private road discussion, I don't want us to get a little off in the weeds here, because I think that's where we're getting. As I read the report, I see, while police services acknowledge the need for emergency housing shelter, they could not offer comments on potential public safety impacts without knowing all will be responsible for operating the shelter and operators' plans, policies, and operating procedures. Yet we're expected to make a decision on that here now without that information. And again, as much as I strongly feel we need to be doing something, and as a city, if we have to incur expenses and put budget items off that we would really like to do to make sure this happens for our vulnerable citizens, I really think the province or the operator of this needs to come forward with the information that is required for us to make an informed decision, not just a decision. So based on that, I am not comfortable moving it forward to any next step.
Good point. Oh, Councillor Gallant.
I'm just going to comment. I agree with all my fellow colleagues. There's a lot of information that hasn't come forth yet to make a final decision. But what I am going to say, when you see 7 people sleeping in a bank, very inhumane, everybody deserves a roof over their head.
Thank you, Councillor, and all councillors, of course, for providing comments at this stage. I'm going to provide some of my own as a member of Planning Board. Once again, we're in a situation where we are, to a certain extent, looking at a land use issue, whether we are talking about a restricted use, a homeless emergency shelter on a particular parcel of land. And we have this, whether it's apartment developments or all kinds of things, it is very hard to detach the operational side. And in this case, it's even more difficult because we're looking at a restricted use application. So once again, we are into that difficult gray space. But overall, there's no question that homelessness is new here in Summerside to the degree that to the degree that it is. And I think it's pretty clear, even if you just look at what we're here doing today. We don't have any zoning in our city that permits a homeless shelter. Not institutional, not some sort of commercial. And we've got, how many zones do we have, Linda? 20? Lots. A sufficient number of zones, none of which include a homeless shelter. And that's probably because we've never had a need for it before. And the things that are driving that, whether they are lack of mental health supports, whether they are lack of addiction services supports, whether they are the continued growth of really dangerous, addictive, illegal drugs in our communities, whether it is the cost of living, all the things that are moving people into areas of housing insecurity, and ultimately some into situations where they don't have anywhere to live, are at play. And there are some things that we can do about it, and there are some things as a city that we simply cannot do anything about. I can totally understand why people have concerns and would have concerns with issues such as safety and operations. At the same time, I understand, step back and think this is 10 beds. That means 10 people with staff. I have to have some sort of faith that the province and the people who work at the province will make selections to have operators who are capable, qualified, and competent to be able to do the things that they know how to do, which is run a housing shelter that I don't know how to do. As much as I would like to review an operational plan for a homeless shelter, I have no value to add to that. I have to be able to trust that the people who are in place making those decisions are going to make good ones. I'm going to park the safety issue, though, for a second. So from a land use perspective, and what staff have presented from a land use planning, I recognizing that it is difficult and there are no ideal locations for a homeless shelter. There are no ideal locations for someone to live in a tent or to sleep in a entrance to a bank. From a land use perspective, I am supportive and agree with staff for what they've presented. Now, where this makes it a little bit different than in other situations is that what is before us is a restricted use application, which allows council to consider and potentially apply conditions. And as far as I am aware, there are no conditions on what those conditions can or cannot be. I'm certainly agree with Councillor Snow that I would like to at least be able to know who the operator is and see what the operation plan is, and have the confidence that our Summerside Police Services are comfortable with any kind of safety plans with respect to the space. I think only time will tell whether we would need additional policing and support services, and I'm hoping we can do a better job than it's been done elsewhere, and we maybe don't get to that situation. But if we do, I want to make sure that we do it, and we do it in the right way. This is a temporary, an emergency shelter. It is not a 24/7 shelter like we have on Winter Street or with Lifehouse. Those are very important. But we have a variety of different people in different situations, and we have certainly some people who have absolutely nowhere to go. And it is particularly concerning this time of year, even more so than it would be in the summer. I know our fire services have concerns with people living in tents in the woods, as do I. I live in the area, and I also live close to forested areas where people are living and have been living in tents, and it is a community safety issue there as well. So there are so many things going on this issue. And it's certainly something that I've spoken about time and again, the importance of having shelter services for people in our community. I also think one of the barriers are we put up some of the barriers ourselves. Myself personally, I have taken time to sit down at Tim Hortons and buy breakfast for people who are unhoused so that I can get to know them. And I've gone to the outreach center in Charlottetown and talked to people who are there. I've tried to at least understand the variety of people and perspectives that are out there and what their needs are. And they are all different, and some of them really have absolutely nowhere to go at some point in time, and that's a real challenge and a tough one for all of us. So I'm going to sort of wrap up my comments. I try and speak less, but I'm still working on that. It's maybe a New Year's resolution. So I think one of the things we really need to do is continue to break down fear and barriers and share the positive experiences that are also out there, and also remember to look at the good things that are happening in our community in terms of the response. And I hope that we can all continue to support the people who are out there on the ground getting things done and helping people who are less fortunate or in really vulnerable situations. And I know some of those folks are here today. So I would only, I said I will be voting in favor to get this to council. I don't think, there's nothing that precludes also the applicant for requesting a delay until they maybe provide some more information on who the operator is going to be. As I understand when I read something somewhere, that selection process was underway and should be done relatively soon. And there is nothing to restrict council from imposing certain conditions, whether those are terms for the restricted use in terms of time, whether it's 18, 24, 36 months that are reviewable. I guess there's nothing that restricts council from having planning board or council approve a site plan, because one thing we don't have is a site plan. Where would these units be? What would they look like? What kind of parking? What kind of fencing would be there? There's nothing that restricts council from requiring a review and approval of an operational plan that includes the safety plan. I think a reasonable review. Those are all things that council can request in order to make sure that the restricted use moves forward. And so I certainly look forward to seeing what happens, and if council wants to put any conditions on, I would certainly hope you do, because I would agree that there is not a lot here, not a lot of meat on the bones. But it's a really important issue, and I'm hoping we can work together as a community to do this right as best we can. So thank you, Councillor.
So I guess with that, as planning board chair, I think I'm prepared to support that the application goes to council for their decision, but I'm not sure as a councillor if I have the information that I need to vote on that decision in 6 days from now. I know residents don't want this prolonged, but I don't feel that they want it rushed either. Like Deputy Mayor Snow said, if there are no plans on having a facility open before February or March, then I don't think we need to make a decision on Monday with so many of these unknown factors. So like I said, I'm certainly willing to move that it goes to council, but I might suggest either a February meeting or that we just table it until we're able to reach out to the applicant for a few of those unknowns. If we can even do that procedurally, can we kind of endorse something as planning board with an open-ended, unknown sort of when the meeting will be, or I'm not sure how we do that. Because I don't think it's appropriate that we have another planning board meeting with another report. I think there's just a few answers that we need to appropriately sort of make that decision on. So maybe if it went to, if we think we have the time to contact the applicant, if we maybe set this for February rather than in 6 days from now, just, or whatever everyone thinks.
Again, do we have any type of, it's important
And
that
that's
we
what I
know
mean,
what
we
the
need to
timing
find
is,
out when they
because
need to open it.
as one planning board member, I'll just speak for myself. I think planning board is supposed to get that information, take that information in, and then provide a good recommendation to our fellow councillors on what we feel they should do. We're sitting here, or I'm sitting here as one member saying, I don't feel I have that information, so I have a hard time saying, let's move it on to council. I think planning board is where the information has to come in and should come in so we can make informed decisions. I just feel that this application, which is extremely important, doesn't feel like it's being treated very importantly because we're not being provided the information to make an informed decision. And I feel the province probably has a lot of the information we're looking for already and just cannot share it for whatever reason, which is fine. But unless there's something pending where a shelter's gonna be there next week, where we really need it next week, we need it tonight, then what are we rushing for until we have the information and our residents feel that we have made an informed decision, so we're not put into a position where residents feel unsafe? Because it doesn't matter what we think or what, it's how people feel. And if they feel unsafe, then it's gonna be an unsafe situation. So we want people to feel as confident in us as councillors and the city as we feel about this situation. So I'm just not confident yet.
Gordon, did you want to?
I would suggest kind of similar to the mayor's comments. I think the planning board and staff have looked at this from a land use perspective, and that's what planning board is supposed to do. Certainly correct council can ask for other information. They can put restrictions or conditions on the restricted use as well. So I think, and Linda, feel free to jump in, that I think if this gets moved to council, and council has further questions that they have of the applicant that they want to get answers on, that's certainly appropriate to ask those, and either wait till you get those answers, or put restrictions on or put conditions on the restrictive use that it's subject to satisfactory answer to, X, Y, Z questions. The other thing I'd add is I believe the applicant is here tonight, and procedurally, they can answer questions this evening if you have them. But I guess my recommendation with the report that you have in front of you would be to move it to council and have staff reach out to, we need a clear list of what the concerns still are, and we can reach out to the applicant and see what answers they can provide. And then council can either choose to make a final decision on the next meeting or the February meeting, or table it to whenever you deem appropriate.
I will say one major concern is when our police services say they cannot comment because they feel they don't have the information. Who am I to make, we need a shelter, no doubt about it, but I feel like we're just moving it along, which we should be, because it's very important. But again, I don't think that's the proper thing to do, just to push it along when our own police services cannot make a recommendation, some sort of comment regarding it.
I believe what we have gone through has been pointed out, that we're looking at the land use, basing the application on the land use, and I certainly agree with all of those facts. I think for me, where I get stuck a bit is that all of council, we all know there is a great need for an emergency shelter. Certainly we do, and if we could have it yesterday, we would want it. But I also think that we have a responsibility not only to the residents who may be in that situation or homeless or need that type of an emergency shelter, we're also responsible to the residents that have expressed their questions and concerns to get all of that information. And I think that's where I'm a bit stuck. I want to make sure that the decision that I vote on, I have all of those questions and check marks listed and they're all answered so that I can confidently speak to it, to any of the residents or the businesses. So for me, to move something forward when I don't have those answers, and I can only speak personally for me, I don't feel comfortable with that. The land use is fine, but we need to have a little bit more, especially when the responsibility, the burden of the responsibility for that decision it's falling upon council. So to make that decision, we need to have all of the answers that we're seeking from planning board. And that's where I'm at. I'm not against it, but I think we do need some answers that really need to, and again, the point about police services. We know that possibly with that type of a situation, there could be situations that public safety, there will be concerns or questions. Well, we need to have those kinds of answers addressed so that we're confident before we vote. Thank you.
I'm not sure why police services made the comment of no comment, because I had asked if at the onset of this, if they were going to be commenting from the beginning, and it was said that they would give their comments at a following meeting. So I assumed maybe what we would get from them would be what they have seen as positive and negatives from maybe Winter Street. That's all I assumed that they would have to go on, because it was the same sort of thing, like, you know, the province had somebody to run it, so I just assumed that that's what we were going to get. I guess I assumed incorrectly and should have inquired further, but when I was told that we were going to get their thoughts later on, I didn't think it was going to be our thoughts are no thoughts.
So whether or not planning board endorses this or not this evening, it still goes to council. So, like I said, I think like a couple others said, it checks the boxes on the land use. That's pretty irrefutable based on the criteria that we're obligated to go by. So, again, as planning board chair, I would move that we move it to council, because there's no reason not to, but I don't think there's any way we can vote as a council in 6 days, because we do need some of those answers. So, members of planning board, feel free to, I mean, I guess all we can do is put that on the floor as planning board. Endorse it, don't endorse it, that's what we're here to do, but I will certainly put on the floor tonight that we move it to council.
I'd second that, Councillor. And again, in terms of ultimately, council will make a decision. If council wants to, as CAO said, table a decision for the future, certainly council can do that at whole council when all of council votes on that. We may get information from an applicant in the interim. We'll see. But I'd certainly second the planning board recommendation for this evening, and then.
And that is in no way, and I think it's understood by now, like, doing that is in no way saying, let's move ahead on this, we need it. Like, we need the answers before council can make a decision,
So,
period. But,
just for clarity, because I understand what you're saying, Councillor Duran, but my understanding is that as planning board, when we're moving it to council, we're either recommending to council that it,
based
Be
on the land
approved.
use, sure.
right. So, okay, just so we're clear, you're either recommending based on the information we have now, based strictly on land use, that it gets approved. And so I guess I want to be on the record, because it is a very sensitive topic, and I'll guarantee you, I don't like hearing the stories of people sleeping in the bank, hearing stories of older people going into banks and feeling scared. Like, I want it on the record that we need this, but we need to make sure we check our boxes
Yep.
as a council and as a city, that we get the answers our residents deserve.
And I agree. And based on every comment that I've heard tonight, it seems as though there is a consensus that there is nothing wrong with the land use. That's what this meeting is about. I'd even go so much to say that if we were to vote on this tomorrow, you know, it would probably be, you know, I wouldn't be able to support it because we just need that information. So, but tonight is the meeting where we the planning board bases its decision on the use of the land, and it's a very difficult thing for me to understand, but that's what it is.
And I think the difference in this type of file is with a restrictive use, council is able to put conditions on that. So what I'm hearing is that council needs more information before they're able to make a final decision, because it may affect what, if any, conditions they want to put on the restricted use as well. So what I'm trying to paraphrase, but what I've heard planning board say is the restricted use, yes, we can recommend from a land use to council, and then council is likely going to have a number of questions around operational plans, who the operator, security, who the operator is, that sort of thing, before they can make a final determination in terms of what conditions they may or may not put on it.
Yeah. That's my you've interpreted at least what I've tried to convey, so, yeah.
You've done a great job, Councillor.
But
Well, let's get to voting then, and we'll see what happens in the next 6 days.
I'll just reread the recommendation again, just so everyone's clear. And again, land use. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. We will obviously report back on when that meeting will take place. The application from Department of Land, Housing and Communities for 25 Frank Mellish Street, PID number 1030303, to allow an emergency housing shelter as a restricted use in the institutional I zone, be recommended to be approved by council. Moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Dan. Members of Planning Board in favor, say aye. Aye.
No,
Opposed? Deputy Mayor Snow. So in the coming days, we will obviously, between, ourselves and staff, communicate with the applicant and get some additional information that council will now need to make that decision, and we'll go from there.
Councillor Brown, can I just
Yes.
quickly just summarize the reason for my vote? I feel strongly that we don't have the information needed to make a recommendation to council. So that's strictly the reason voting against it.
Okay, and I will pass things back over to your worship.
Thank you, Councillor, and all councillors for a thoughtful and engaged discussion. I think this is a good example of how councils are supposed to operate. So with that, I will adjourn our planning board meeting. We will take maybe just 5 minutes here, and we will start our committee of the whole meeting at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody. All right, I think we'll try and resume. All right, everyone. So, sorry, that's my bad. I said we'd start at 6 and we're here 6:09, so apologies. Brian, are you good? Great. So now we'll call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of January 9, 2024 here at the City of Summerside. I will call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor McDougall, second. Councillor Snow, I thought we were going to get out of here really early. I'm all in favor of the agenda. Please say aye. Any opposed or changes? Say nay. Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as presented. This is the opportunity for any member of council to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda for the evening. Hearing none, we will move on. We have a few items here. Our first item is a taxi bylaw CS-25 staff update, and we have Director Gunn here with us to speak to council. Director?
Good evening, everyone. This is my first time appearing before you all. So I'm here to give you a little bit of information in regards to potential review of the taxi bylaw. In the late fall of 2023, city staff were approached by the owners of a ride-share business, similar to what you probably know to be like Uber. And they currently operate in a number of other regional municipalities, including Charlottetown. They were seeking information about how the city's taxi bylaw might apply to their service if it were to operate in Summerside. And so there were some discussions involved in and a review of the rideshare business's practices and processes, and a comparison in what the city's taxi bylaw contemplates. It's understood based on our cursory review that the rideshare business does not fit neatly within the traditional business model of taxi services that operate within the city. And it is a staff recommendation that the issue be reviewed and considered and discussed by the Bylaw Governance and Communications Committee, and that further information and/or recommendations be brought back to council for future consideration.
Comments, questions from council? Councillor Duran?
Just one question, and I just noticed, I guess, through social media that the company's currently operating in Summerside. So this sort of in the meantime, while we do this, that's okay, obviously. And I know we discussed ride sharing before, and it was determined that it's generally, I don't know, legal for ride sharing companies to operate in the city because we have no bylaw against it. But I guess I just wanted to clarify that it's pretty well known now that they are running in the city, and that's okay, I guess, from a bylaw perspective.
Again, it doesn't fit neatly within our taxi bylaw, and so we need to review and discuss what, if anything, the city wants to do going forward. And so that's why we think it's most appropriately started at the committee level.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that we need to review it. We should review it. I guess Justin's comment is sort of where I'm at. I've had a couple calls now from taxi operators, or one taxi operator and a taxi driver, just with some concerns about it operating in town and not having to follow some of the same rules and regulations that they have to follow as taxi drivers, and curious how they're allowed to operate and whether we should be allowing them to operate. And I told them basically I don't know for sure, I'll pass it along. And then this happened to be just on the agenda at the same time as things happen. But I am curious if we as a city are liable, or is there anything we allowing them to operate in the meantime until we realize whether or not they should be operating or not operating, is that the way we should be proceeding, or is, should be, we don't know, you can't, I don't know, and that's just a blanket question. Ride sharing seems to be the way of the world now.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to revert back to my original comment, which is because they don't fit neatly in the bylaw, it's hard to exactly say they're operating illegally in black and white, or that they're operating above board in black and white. So that's where we're going to review the situation at the committee level and decide what, if anything, we recommend gets done on a go-forward basis from there, and take the information back to council.
No, go ahead. Okay. I guess I'm just trying to think of an example that we ran into as a municipality between an established restaurant and vending trucks. I'm just looking at it this way. When we had applications come in for vendors, there wasn't a lot written as far as criteria, guidelines, or whatnot, and I see this the same way. An established taxi operation that has to apply for licensing, and they have a protocol and whatnot, and then Uber or rideshare, they may not. So is there any way that we could bring some of those kinds of guidelines that we do with vending or vendors, have some kind of guidelines in place so that anybody who is in rideshare or wanting to do that, could those be incorporated as a Part B to a taxi? Does that make, I'm not...
It does, Norma. I guess, again, I feel like it's just a wee bit premature to go down that road yet, until the committee kind of dives deep into the information and does a comparison of what the business model is and what the taxi bylaw contemplates and is meant to regulate.
And, well, I don't necessarily mean do something like that as far as just, trying to fix a situation or whatnot, but I'm just feeling that if people do have questions, or there's calls coming in from taxi operators and asking, does the city have any kind of guidelines or whatnot?
We're reviewing it. My comment
Under
would be,
review.
it's currently under review. The committee meets tomorrow.
I was just going to say, so we can add that to the agenda for tomorrow?
Yes.
And Deputy Chief Blackear might be in attendance? Or somebody?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay,
Yes, I told you that. Yes, the
Okay.
intention is to have,
right.
and
So
he's,
then we
he's been involved at the early stage of discussions too.
Yeah.
And has some valuable information
Yeah,
to
and
provide.
he's familiar with the taxi bylaw requirements. So
Correct.
then we can,
Correct.
yeah, okay, excellent.
Thank you, Carrie.
I just have one question. Are you requesting, or would the committee also look at the bylaw as a whole and how it is functioning outside of a rideshare review, or is this only, how does a rideshare?
Both.
Both, okay,
Both.
great. Good opportunity to do
Yes.
the first when you're doing
Yes.
the latter, absolutely.
Just as a little piece of information, and not what other municipalities do is totally relevant to us, but for instance, Charlottetown does not have a taxi bylaw.
What do they have? How do they rate or they don't rate?
They don't.
Free for all.
Yeah. They are a business as a going concern, similar to other businesses.
Interesting, okay. Look forward to hearing whatever comes back.
Yeah, any further questions, comments from council? So if council agrees, then we'll send this to the Bylaw Governance and Communications Committee for further review, and they'll report back when they're ready. Thank you, Director. Next item is, I guess, something that I put on here that came up in the past. I think it was a question through a discussion that we had at planning board, was our Parkland dedication. So as I understand, when developments move forward, there is a financial contribution for parkland development in our community. The question that I had posed is what is the scope of our parkland dedication projects? Do they have to apply to green space in that one area? I think the question that I specifically asked is could it apply for climate adaptation or mitigation measures? And I was kind of curious as to find out where our parkland dedication matches up with other jurisdictions to make sure that, particularly as we continue to grow up, one of the benefits of having increased density is to have increased park space and green spaces for people who don't have it in their front yards or their backyards to be able to use and enjoy. And whenever I travel, that's always one of the great benefits when you're in neighborhoods that have higher density, to have those fantastic community spaces. So I had just hoped to ask council if you would be comfortable if we sent it to our planning board standing committee to review what the current parkland dedication process is, and then come forward with some questions and potential direction to council, and go from there. Okay. Okay, perfect. That committee is good. Oh, it's going to be busy. That's good. That's great. Next, the other direction. So things going to committee, things coming from committee. This will hand over to the Bylaw Governance Communications Standing Committee Chair. This was the public appointment policy. We had this come forward to council, our last council of the whole, but I'm not sure everybody had read it. And so we decided to just wait a little bit and come back. So can I hand it over to you, Councillor Adams?
Thank you, Your Worship. So since everybody's had a little bit more time, I guess really at this stage, we're looking for any discussion, questions, and anything that we can take. If we're not unsure, we can take back to committee for further investigation. But has anybody noticed anything that is a question, or anything that they'd like to add, or anything they're wondering why it's in there and does it need to be in there? Anybody?
And that can be, so what would happen now if there are no questions or comments or concerns right now, then it would go, the committee would then bring this policy forward to the next council meeting, which would again provide another opportunity to ask any questions, but that would be accompanied by a resolution to adopt what do we call it here? The public appointment policy.
Policy. Yep. Perfect.
Okay, great. So that will come to our next council meeting, which I guess is in 6 days. All right, back to back. Awesome. Yeah, we're cruising along here, folks. It's great. We're going to get home before no, it's only 6:22. Okay, great. Next, item 8, we have Deputy C. Oh, did I skip 7? Oh, I scratched it out. So I thought that was a standing item on the agenda. Councillor Adams, East-West Corridor update.
Okay, so just what it is, wondering if we have an update. Something that's been on the budget for a couple of years now. Felt like we were picking up some actual dedication to the project, picking up some speed, and it looks like we're, I was told December, there was November, there was December, I was told the new year. So just wondering now what is going on with it. Hearing, of course, the rumor mill about town, and just sort of wanted to put that at ease. And we went over this today in another meeting regarding RFPs and tenders and so on. I guess I'm just curious as to when things are signed, like what's our, like I know at the end we have penalties and so on for things not being done on time, but like what about things starting? Like how can we be continuously put off is my question. And like whose end is this on? Like is it on our end? Are things being signed? Like when was this like finalized to be like put forward, I guess, is my question. Because it's supposed to be in the fall that this was supposed to, we were supposed to be starting a path through.
So I can give a bit of an update. So we've contracted with WSP to manage this project for us, so we are working through them. Kern & Briggs is the contractor that won the tender. You're absolutely correct, the start date that Kern & Briggs originally indicated was November 14th, and WSP and our staff worked with property owners and certainly communicated that date. That date came and went. And then again, we were told December 11th. That date came and went. Most recently, just within the last week actually, WSP staff and Kern & Briggs staff have met on site and started to I just want to use the right language, but basically they've started to look at the site, trying to assess what trees are going to cut down first, what parts of the fences on certain properties are going to take down first. And as I guess I've communicated through a couple emails, we do have a sign that's ready to go up that says, east-west connector coming soon type of thing. And we were waiting for some of those trees to get cut down beforehand, but I think we're very close to that. In terms of penalties, you're absolutely correct. Typically, our contracts, the winning contractor, as part of their tender submission, gives their timeline of when the project is going to be completed by. I'm not aware that we've ever had penalties on a start date, but there are certainly penalties included in the tender if the contract is not, if the work's not done by within the timeline as proposed. Yeah, so I guess the good news is that folks have been on site and are beginning to do work. The bad news is there hasn't been as much work done to date as we had hoped when we originally had talked about a November 14th start date.
So does that, okay, just a couple things. So does that budget carry forward into the next fiscal? It does?
Yep.
Okay, okay, so I guess anyways, I just don't understand how when we sign a contract with somebody on a certain date in October, November, I guess, how we can be put off like this. I guess it just doesn't, it's just not usually how business works. But go ahead.
At the end of the day, they have a certain amount of work they have to complete based on the contract by a certain date still. So
Yes, correct.
so their start date really is irrelevant. If they don't start, then they're going to miss their end date.
In some ways, yes. I mean, I'm no expert on contracting. I know
Either.
Contractors have, certain amount of projects, they have a certain amount of employees. We run into this all the time during the summer months when the contractors, our local contractors, are working on multiple projects, and sometimes we wonder why project A was started over here, but it looks like they're not doing any work on it. But, a local contractor may have different crews that are moving about town doing work on multiple projects all at one time. So does it make any difference when they start? Maybe no, but at the same time, we're working with a number of private property owners. We had, we had farmers who had crops on the field that we talked to and tried to have them get their harvest in as quick as they could, and it would certainly be better if the project had started when the contractor said they were going to start.
Okay, gotcha.
But until it's not finished on time, and there's no reason at this point to think that it won't be, then there's no real financial consequences.
Okay.
What's on time? What's the deadline?
It's more than I can tell you tonight. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can find out and circulate it to council for sure.
Yeah, has the contractor told us why they didn't start? November 14th, December, whatever, and then
Contractor
January.
told WSP, and I'm just going by some emails here, Kern Briggs had crews wrapping up other projects, and that'll be a couple weeks before they were finished and ready to begin construction.
And I believe that was mentioned in the 2 emails that you sent, CAO, to us, like how it was started, but there was some factors why they couldn't get started, that they were working on another project that had to take precedent before they could move into the next. There was something in the body of the emails that you had explained to us as a council.
I think I've sent along some information.
Yeah.
I don't want to say exactly how much
No, but I think you did
explanation
explain
there's
it.
been. It would be preferable if this project had started, but Kern Briggs has told us that or told WSP, who's told us, that they've been wrapping up some other projects first.
I think one of the things that from just talking to anybody, around there that has any development projects on the go, like smaller contractors, developers, whatever, it's really difficult right now for them, from what I don't know if any of you have heard that, but trying to get people. A lot of people, like there's a real shortage, and a lot of them are finding it really hard to meet some of their end dates or to get started because there's a shortage of people for the crews, and I don't know if they've ever explained any of that information, and wonder if that could be part of the reason what we're running into as a municipality. It's not an excuse, but I think a lot of different contractors are running into that shortage of people, trades.
And yeah, I completely agree with that, but if you're running into it, like, why are we always the ones going and asking the question? Why aren't they updating us? Why are we going to WSP? Why are WSP going to Kern and Briggs? Or then they going to WSP with the answer, WSP coming back to us with an answer? Like, why aren't they proactive in saying, sorry guys, we're shorthanded, we're trying to finish this up? Like, I guess I don't understand bidding on a tender if you know you're not going to start it, because you don't have the bodies. To me, don't bid on the tender if you can't start it. And we, as a city, we have projects for each fiscal, and we have other projects we want to start. And this is just taking it into another that's going to even compound the issue of tradespeople even more for other projects we want to get going. So I just find the dragging the feet really, really consistent, and I have some landowners who say they don't even have development agreements. So I think there's so much that we don't know, and I think there's so much that has to be worked out. So I think we really need a meeting with maybe, I don't know if it's tech services or who, to actually tell us what's going on, because there's a lot of there's so many different players with like the developer, there's so many landowners, the city, and I think everybody needs to get on the same page, because some people are saying they have agreements, some people don't have agreements, some people are saying surveying's done, some people are saying surveying's not done, some people are saying it's being put off for this reason, some people say it's being put off for another reason. So just put it out there, like, what's the deal? Why is the delay? And then everybody knows, and we can accept it and move on. Anyway, but just to be strung along when, as a city, we have so many projects we want to get started and work on is sort of, anyway, I find it quite annoying.
I think it would be really interesting to find out if other municipalities run into that, and do they have something in their policy that would, have some kind of a penalty or whatever. That would be helpful. Then if there's other municipalities doing it, then might be something that we could incorporate.
Any further questions, comments from council? Maybe Councillor Adams, you can loop back with the CAO, and I don't know if WSP can provide just a note on summary where things are at, and we can stay on it. And I'm not sure other CAO, you can, yeah, I guess you can contract start by dates as well, so certainly to put as a note, because this is only phase one. Any further comments, questions? Okay, now we'll move on to number 8. This is draft AT network update from Deputy CAO and Director DesRosiers.
All right, thank you. So at our last month's meeting, I believe, council directed staff to bring back a little more official version of our draft active transportation plan or listing of routes by priority and by year. So staff went back and did some work on that. It's, as I mentioned, it's certainly in an initial form, draft form. We've taken feedback on the drafting of this sort of 10-year plan from our own internal staff, as well as recommendations from Safe Summerside's most recent proposal to the city. As discussed, because I'm sure we'll get into it at some point, design standards will be completed by a third-party engineer and done so by specific route year over year. The network will consider alterations as we move forward, as communities and neighborhoods change and future developments occur as well. And there likely will be alterations to timelines based on available funding and budget allocations and pressures as we move along. And will there be additional considerations for routes beyond the 10-year plan? Well, we hope so, obviously, but this is sort of setting us forward for the next 8 to 10 years. So that's just a really brief summary. So what I'm going to do tonight is just bring up a map, sort of outline kind of where we plan to go over the next few years in terms of recommendations to council for future AT spending. But again, these are year-over-year considerations at budget time. So hopefully everybody can sort of see this. I'm going to back it out a little bit. So this is just a brief map of Summerside, and I'll start overlaying routes in order by year. So on the left-hand side here, this is our bit of our current and future plan. And then as I click along here, I'll describe the routes. So obviously in 2021, we did our first AT project on Greenwood Drive, leading from Pope Road down as far as we could get to Willow Avenue. And it took an additional 2 years to complete Greenwood Drive based on funding and contractor work to get us all the way down to Water Street. So phase one or year one or project one took 3 years. And it was a north-south connector, as I mentioned, from Pope Road all the way down to Water Street along the boardwalk. So then moving along to the next phase, we are proposing a 2-phase project with Pope Road. So in 2024, we'll be proposing at budget time to complete Pope Road from the roundabout on Central to Greenwood Drive. And then subsequently, we will be moving along in 2025/2026 with phase 2, which would go from Greenwood Drive over to South Drive. Now I skipped a layer, but I'll just move back to it as we are currently or soon to be under construction with the east-west housing corridor that will be completed with active transportation lanes as well. So that'll be ongoing through the summer and obviously completion into the next couple of years, but it's underway next year or this year. Moving forward, we would continue on in 2027 with Pope Road Extension over to McEwen, then down to South Drive. You'll see a fairly large swath there. And I'm going to kind of describe these in a little greater detail once I get the whole map up. Then we propose to move on to McEwen Road, another north-south connector. Water Street East. And then finally, in 2031, 2032, another north-south connector using a series of sort of smaller streets running north-south connecting to McEwen and further up into the city. So this is our sort of our colorful mapping plan for the next 8 years that we're proposing for AT routes throughout the city. Now, if you look at them, you can see that they connect fairly nicely from both ends of the city, north and south, east and west. And they do sort of hit the high points of what we think are going to be future developments in the city. They utilize as well our boardwalk for certain portions along the downtown core, And another layer that we will eventually add on to is perhaps utilizing the Confederation Trail as another east-west connector component as well. So yeah, that's sort of what we're working with as of today for the next few years in terms of recommended projects. Now, each of these colorful lines represents its own individual project, its own individual budget request, its own individual design standards based on the size of neighborhoods and the current roadway construction. So for an example, some of our collectors like South Drive or McEwen Road are larger, wider streets that will require a little less work. Some, like the blue squiggly line here through Euston Street up to McEwen, will require some additional work because those are different style and type streets. So as I mentioned, they'll each be designed and kind of budgeted for year over year and as specific projects, but they all tie into what we see as a nice, safe way to get around town. So I zipped through that because you had done such a good job ripping through the last budget or agenda items, but I'm open for questions.
Deputy CAO, I'm just wondering, do you have any type of, just a rough ballpark figure of all of those connections over the years?
No.
Not that it's going to make any difference right now, but just to kind of get our minds around that.
I don't. And when we set out on the Greenwood Drive initial project, that was supposed to be a one-year project, somewhere in the $700,000 to $800,000 range to go from Pope Road to Water Street, and it took 3 years and came in at 1.7 million. So I'm trying to temper expectations for myself and our department and of course the community. We all want to see this as a community, but it's going to require dollars. It's going to require funding, yeah. So and it's a long-term play, and as you know, as you go through the budget seasons, there's other pressures that tie up our capital dollars. So there may be a year where we need to take a hiatus because there's other things that we need to deal with. So, but it is nice, and as the mayor indicated earlier today when we spoke, it's nice to have the network plan in front of us, and it's a map forward that we can point to and at least have a plan. So yeah, I didn't really answer your question, but no, I don't have a budget figure right now.
Well, I didn't think that you would, but I'm just thinking over that many years, Anyway, but thank you.
JP or Mr. DesRosiers, what you mentioned talking with Safe Summerside. How do they feel about, like, when you presented or chatted with them? They confident with this, or not confident, but are they accepting of it? They think it's a good plan.
I'm not sure yet. I'm presenting it to council first. I think it's important to get it out in front of council and and have a discussion internally. There's still some work to be done. There's no question. I mean, we did utilize a number of the key routes that SAFE presented in their network plan. Their plan is certainly more robust in that there's a significant amount of more routes identified. But as I indicated in my first slide, this is just the next 8 years. So beyond the next 8 years, there may be some additional routes that we can incorporate. But as I think planning any further out than 2032, knowing how fast our community is changing, I think might be a bit of an exercise in futility. I think right now, the next 8 years being mapped is a pretty good start.
I just want to start by saying I think this looks great. I mean, we only really have the one active transport in Summerside, so seeing more is great. I am wondering, is there any consideration put in to kind of connect these active transport lanes a little bit further into things like grocery stores? Because right now, other than, I guess, the tealish color one, that would come to like Sobeys, correct, around there. The other ones don't really connect to anything. I'm just wondering if there's been thought put in to the fact that active transport lanes aren't always just for exercise, but they are for people to access basic things that they will need. It's not just for someone who wants to ride a bike around, it's for people who only have a bike to ride around to get to places. I think that for 8 years, this looks great. Future or kind of right now, is there a possibility to switch things a little bit to get closer, or are we feeling like right now we're kind of close enough and the kind of side roads people would have to take would be, I don't want to say safe enough, but safe enough to get there?
So our thoughts on that are, and I agree with your point, once the identified routes are sort of publicized, in addition to the route map, there will be some helpful tips in our promotions in terms of how to, when you leave a designated AT lane, how to safely access Walmart, or how to, navigate to different areas of our city that don't have AT routes. But for the mapping purposes and project base, I think this is the best approach forward. There is not a really good financially feasible method to get to north of Granville to that commercial district, unfortunately. And I don't want that to hinder all the other good routes that we want to accomplish now. So, Gallant Street is a great option once you get off of the Walker or the Pope Road extension here to get down behind the grocery stores and so on and so forth. So that'll be sort of a helpful tip in and amongst our promotion.
No, like I said, I think it's great. I think it's a great starting point. It looks really good. It gets you close enough to most things. And like you said, nothing's going to be perfect.
Right.
Unless we have unlimited amounts of money, which we don't.
So then in terms of next steps, Director, I'm assuming we package this together, provide a little more meat on the bones on the first slide there in terms of what sort of parameters we'd be looking at, clarify some of the things in terms of these are targets and what we'd be working towards. It would be nice to explore a little bit more about what Councillor Cameron was talking about connecting, even making sure that the high value designations, whether they're schools or grocery stores, can be easily connected. So would this then go to standing committee for, I guess it would be planning, I guess you would bring it to standing committee for planning, and then come back to council for an adoption, so that we would have a plan adopted for council and something to hold us to and to keep forward for the going future.
Sounds good.
Councillor Duran?
Yeah, just one question that I had, just looking at the map. I guess the next one, the 2024 East-West Connector component, is that its own budgetary thing, or does that sort of get combined with the actual East-West Connector project itself? Like, is that, like for every year we'll have an AT budget. Like, is that one sort of different in the fact that it's sort of in with the East-West Connector?
To be discussed at budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still lots of decisions to be made.
But that is sort of in the specs of the tender, like it has to include a AT lane on it, so it's just sort of a
Yes.
different.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Great. Thank you, Director, and we'll send that then. You'll work on it, develop it a little further, take it to planning board. We can come back to council for adoption of our AT network plan.
Yep.
Okay,
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Item 8, Veterans Concerns, Councillor Gallant. Councillor?
Okay, I don't want to get into the weeds in this, so I'm just going to kind of make it brief. I got a phone call one morning at 7:30 in the morning, and people shouldn't call me before I have my first coffee. Some veterans are a little concerned about community engagement, protocols, significant dates that we're not really recognizing. So I came in and talked to Gordon about it because I wanted to put it on the agenda because this individual had said that they were going to go to the media, and I didn't want anybody to be kind of blindsided, so that's why I put it on the agenda. But I'm actually meeting with Vice President of PI Command next week, and he deals with seniors issues. So I'm going to kind of pick his brain, and I'm kind of putting it out there to maybe do kind of a community meeting with us, with the veterans organizations, to kind of see what we can do and what they're kind of looking for. Because I know there's some significant dates that are coming up this year, and maybe we can try to incorporate them within our city.
Sounds great, Councillor Gallant. So maybe you report back to council then at the next committee of the whole on how that meeting went, and whatever we can do to, as well, to recognize the support and contributions our veterans have made in our community is all right by all of us, I would expect. Okay, so with that, we will, yes, absolutely, Councillor McColman.
I just want to ask Councillor Gallant on the community engagement protocols. Were you given any idea of what's been missed? Again, like, I'm a little confused because of the Legion and all of the things that they have. Like, I think sometimes as a city, we try to pull alongside of whatever they plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, did they indicate, like, what is it that's being missed?
Well, when ships come in, people aren't notified. Pictures up on the wall. Portraits. Again, significant dates that are coming up. That I will find out because I do know there are some coming up in 2024. So once I meet with PI Command and I get all the information, then I will report back.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Council. So with that, we'll adjourn the committee of the whole meeting, and as long as everybody's okay, we'll just keep rolling into our special council meeting. So I will call to order the special council meeting for the City of Summerside of January 9, 2024. Call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Adams. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Opportunity for any member of council to declare any conflict of interest with respect to any item before council on the agenda. Hearing none, we will now move on to resolutions. These resolutions are coming from planning board, I believe, so they are in the purview of Councillor Duran, and he's ready. Councillor?
Thank you again, Your Worship. Yeah, I will just get right into them. Resolution COS-24-001. Just realizing now that the 24 refers to the year that it is in. Last year was 2-3. Interesting. 001, first one of the year. Okay. Cool. Moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Snow. Whereas an application was received from 102454 PEI Inc. to amend the future land use plan for a portion of PID number 756825 from commercial land use to residential land use under the City of Summerside official plan. And whereas in accordance with section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, council shall consider the following general criteria as applicable: conformity with all requirements of this bylaw, conformity with the official plan, suitability of the site for the proposed development, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses, any comments from residents or other interested persons, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking, and parklands for accommodating the development, and any projected infrastructure requirements, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources, impacts on city finances and budgets, other matters as specified in this bylaw, and other matters as considered relevant. Be it resolved that official plan amendment 0082 to amend the City of Summerside official plan be hereby formally adopted. This bears the recommendation of the planning board meeting held on December 18th, 2023. Official Plan Amendment 0082 to amend the City of Summerside official plan. The Council of the City of Summerside, under authority vested in it by Section 18 of the Planning Act, hereby enacts as follows. The land use for a portion of PID number 756825, as shown on Schedule B of the future land use plan, is designated as residential land use, hereby excluding it from its former designation of commercial land use under the City of Summerside official plan.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. Resolution COS 24-001 is on the floor. Any questions, comments from council? Hearing none, I will call for a vote with respect to the resolution. Moved by Councillor Duran, second by Councillor Snow. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is carried. Councillor?
Resolution COS 24-002, moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Snow. Whereas an application was received from 102-454 PEI Inc. for a zoning amendment for a portion of PID number 756825 from Service Commercial C2 zone to high-density residential R4 zone under the City of Summerside zoning bylaw. And whereas zoning bylaw amendment 0083, a bylaw to amend the City of Summerside zoning bylaw, was read and declared as read a first time at the council meeting held on December 5th, 2023. And whereas in accordance with section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, council shall consider the following general criteria as applicable. Conformity with all requirements of this plan, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw, conformity with the official plan, suitability of the site for the proposed development, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses, any comments from residents or other interested persons, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking and parklands for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources, impacts on city finances and budgets, other matters as specified in this bylaw and other matters as considered relevant. Be it resolved that zoning amendment 0083, a bylaw to amend the City of Summerside zoning bylaw, be hereby declared as read a second time. This bears the recommendation of the planning board meeting held on December 18th, 2023. Zoning amendment 0083, a bylaw to amend the City of Summerside zoning bylaw. The Council of the City of Summerside, under authority vested in it by Section 18 and Section 19 of the Planning Act, hereby enacts as follows. The zoning for a portion of PID number 756825, shown on Schedule B of the City of Summerside zoning bylaw, is designated as high-density residential R4 zone, hereby excluding it from its former designation of Service Commercial C2.
Thank you, Councillor. Resolution COS 24-002 is on the floor. Any comments, questions from council? Hearing none, now I will call for a vote. The resolution is moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor Snow. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is carried. Councillor Duran?
Finally, resolution COS 24-003, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Morrison. Whereas an application was received from 102-454 PEI Inc. for a zoning amendment for a portion of PID number 756825 from Service Commercial C2 zone to high-density residential R4 zone under the City of Summerside zoning bylaw. And whereas zoning bylaw amendment 0083, a bylaw to amend the City of Summerside zoning bylaw, was read and declared as read at two separate meetings of council held on different days. Be it resolved that zoning bylaw amendment 0083, a bylaw to amend the City of Summerside zoning bylaw, be hereby formally adopted.
Resolution COS 24-003 is on the floor. Any further comments, questions from council? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. The motion is moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution is carried. Thank you, Councillor Duran. I have to flip back to my agenda item here, but I think we now move into in-camera discussion. We have two non-residence tax rate and fire hall financing. So at this point, we'll just take 1 or 2 minutes for folks to clear out, and we will get that done. Get home.